The Afghan sun hammered down on the convoy of 4 Humvees as they wound through the narrow mountain pass. The kind of heat that turned metal into branding irons and sweat into rivers. Staff Sergeant Elena Thorne sat in the third vehicle, her M4 carbine resting across her lap, eyes scanning the ridgeline out of pure instinct. The landscape stretched before them in shades of brown and gray, jagged peaks clawing at a cloudless sky, ancient rock formations that had witnessed countless battles across thousands of years. Beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way, deadly beautiful. Corporal Davis sat in the driver's seat, hands relaxed on the wheel, humming along to whatever country song played in his head. "Another milk run, Sergeant," he said, flashing that young, confident smile. "Should be back at base in time for chow. Heard they got real chicken today, not that mystery meat." Elena didn't respond. Something felt wrong. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. That primal instinct that separated survivors from casualties in this godforsaken country. The pass was too quiet. No birds circling overhead. No movement along the rocks. Just the rumble of diesel engines and the crunch of tires on gravel. Her hand moved to the radio. "Lead vehicle, this is 3. Recommend we..." The world exploded. The lead Humvee erupted in a massive fireball, the IED detonating with such force that the shockwave hit Elena's chest like a physical blow. The vehicle lifted completely off the ground, flipping end over end before crashing down in a twisted heap of burning metal and screaming men. Elena felt the blast before she heard it, a pressure wave that sucked the air from her lungs and made her ears ring with a high-pitched whine. "Contact! Contact!" Someone screamed over the radio, their voice cracking with panic. Then the ridgelines came alive. Muzzle flashes sparked from dozens of positions, a coordinated ambush executed with precision. The sharp crack of AK-47s mixed with the deeper boom of RPGs. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked past their windshield, missing by inches, and exploded against the cliff wall behind them. Rock shards peppered their hull like angry hornets. "Evasive! Evasive!" Davis yanked the wheel hard right, too hard. The Humvee's wheels caught the edge of the road where it crumbled away into nothing. Elena felt the sickening sensation of weightlessness as they tipped, the horizon tilting at an impossible angle. Then the world became a violent tumble of metal, glass, and bodies. She slammed against her restraints, then the doorframe, then the roof as the vehicle rolled. Once, twice, the sound deafening, metal shrieking, glass shattering, men screaming, the world spinning in a chaos of sky and earth and fire. When the Humvee finally stopped rolling, it was on its side. Elena hung suspended by her seatbelt, disoriented, her ears ringing with a sound like 1,000 bells. Warm liquid ran down her face. Blood, she realized distantly, from a gash on her forehead. Then the pain hit. Her left leg was pinned beneath the collapsed doorframe, crushed at an angle that made her stomach turn. Worse, she felt wetness spreading across her left side, hot and sticky. Shrapnel. She'd taken shrapnel to her ribs, could feel the jagged metal still lodged there. "Davis," she gasped, turning her head toward the driver's seat. Corporal Davis hung motionless in his restraints, head tilted at an unnatural angle. His eyes stared at nothing. Dead, neck broken in the rollover. 22 years old, from Tennessee, engaged to his high school sweetheart, gone. Outside, the battle raged. Bullets punched through the armored hull with metallic pings that sounded like death knocking. She heard screaming, American voices calling for medics, for cover, for their mothers. Through the shattered windshield, she saw the second Humvee had stopped moving. Its gunner slumped over his .50 cal, body riddled with rounds. Then she saw Lieutenant Morrison stumble from the burning lead vehicle, his uniform on fire, flames consuming him. He managed 3 steps before insurgent fire cut him down. Their commanding officer, the man responsible for coordinating their defense, dead in the dirt. "We're going to die here," someone sobbed over the radio. "We're all going to die." Elena's training kicked in. Not the training that appeared in her official record. The other training. The training that wasn't supposed to exist. Her mind became ice cold, analytical. She counted muzzle flashes through the smoke and chaos. 15, maybe 20 enemy fighters. They had the high ground, numerical advantage, and surprise. The convoy was pinned in a perfect kill zone with limited cover and no leadership. Someone had to take charge. Gritting her teeth against the agony, Elena unclipped her seatbelt and dropped awkwardly onto what was now the floor. Her pinned legs screamed in protest, and she felt something grind in ways bones shouldn't grind. Fresh blood welled from her side, where the shrapnel wound tore wider with movement. She needed a tourniquet, now. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from hundreds of training repetitions she wasn't supposed to remember. She pulled the cat tourniquet from her medical pouch, positioned it high on her thigh, higher than the injury, and cranked the windlass. The pain was excruciating. White-hot agony that made her vision blur, and her jaw clenched so hard she thought her teeth might crack. But the bleeding slowed. The crimson river became a trickle. That's when she noticed the other passenger in her vehicle. Petty Officer First Class Nathaniel Kincaid, Navy SEAL medic who'd hitched a ride back to base after a joint operation. He was already moving, crawling through the destroyed Humvee toward the rear hatch with his medical ruck strapped tight to his back. "You're hit," he said, his eyes quickly assessing her injuries with professional detachment. Calm, focused, the kind of calm that came from years of seeing the worst humanity could do to itself. "I'm functional," Elena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "The others need you more." Nate hesitated, clearly wanting to argue. Another scream from outside decided him. "Don't move. I'll be back." He kicked open the rear hatch and combat crawled toward the nearest casualties, his body low to the ground as bullets whipped overhead. Elena watched him go, then turned her attention to the destroyed radio equipment. The convoy's communications were their lifeline. Without it, no quick reaction force, no air support, no rescue. Just death, slow or fast, but certain. She dragged herself toward the radio mount, her injured leg leaving a smear of blood across the metal floor. Every movement was agony, fires shooting up her spine, but she'd endured worse in training. Much worse. The radio was sparking, half the wiring torn loose in the crash. But maybe, just maybe. Outside, Nate's voice carried over the chaos. "I need cover. Someone give me suppressing fire." She could hear the desperation in his tone. They were losing. The SEALs didn't lose. But without leadership, without coordination, even the best trained soldiers became casualties waiting to happen. Her fingers found the radio's guts, sorting through the tangled mess of wires and circuits. There, the main power lead had torn free, but the backup battery was intact. She stripped wires with her knife, her hands surprisingly steady despite the blood loss, and began jerry-rigging connections. "Come on," she thought. "Work. Please, work." A bullet punched through the hull inches from her head, but Elena didn't flinch. She twisted the final wires together, and the radio sparked to life with a burst of static. She grabbed the handset, keying the emergency frequency. "Any station, this is Falcon 3-6. Troops in contact. Danger close. Request immediate QRF and air support. How copy?" For a moment, only static answered. Then, "Falcon 3-6, this is Warhammer, Maine. Send your grid coordinates and sitrep." Elena rattled off their position from memory, her voice crisp and professional, despite the pain threatening to drag her under. 4 vehicles, ambush, 15 to 20 enemy fighters on the ridgeline. We have multiple casualties. KIA includes our commanding officer. We need support now. Roger 3-6. QRF is spinning up. 8 minutes out. Apache gun runs inbound. 3 minutes. Can you mark targets? Elena's eyes found the smoke grenade on her vest. Affirmative. Stand by for target marking. She dropped the handset and began the agonizing crawl toward the rear hatch. Through the opening, she could see the battle. Nate working frantically on a soldier with a sucking chest wound, blood everywhere. Two privates huddled behind a wheel well, firing blindly over their shoulders. And the enemy closing in, emboldened by the Americans' disorganization. Elena pulled herself through the hatch, collapsing into the dirt outside. Her vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges. Blood loss. She was running on borrowed time. "Need defensive positions," she gasped. One of the privates, barely 19 years old, face streaked with tears and dirt, stared at her. "The LT's dead, we don't—" "I'm giving orders now." Elena's voice cracked like a whip, cutting through his panic. Years of leadership training that officially never happened surged to the surface. "You and Jackson, establish a perimeter on the north side. Sustain fire, keep their heads down. Kincaid, how many critical?" Nate looked up from his patient, surprise flickering across his face at her tone, her command presence. "3 critical, 5 wounded, but mobile. Mobile wounded grab weapons from the KIAs and form a firing line. We hold until the cavalry arrives. 3 minutes. We can last 3 minutes." Something in her tone, the absolute certainty, the command presence, cut through the panic. The soldiers moved, taking positions, finally fighting back with coordination instead of chaos. Elena pulled the smoke grenade, yanked the pin, and hurled it toward the densest cluster of muzzle flashes. Purple smoke billowed across the ridgeline, marking the enemy positions. "Warhammer, targets marked with purple smoke, clear hot." "Roger 3-6, birds inbound, keep your heads down." The Apache attack helicopters came in low and fast, their 30mm chain guns roaring like dragons. The ridgeline erupted in explosions and dust. Enemy fire slackened immediately as the insurgents broke and ran, survival instinct overriding tactical discipline. Elena allowed herself a small, grim smile. They were going to make it. Then she saw him, an insurgent fighter who'd circled around, emerging from behind a boulder barely 20 feet away. A K-47 raised and aimed directly at Nate's back as he worked on his patient, completely exposed. No time to shout a warning, no time to think. Elena's hand dropped to her sidearm, drawing in one fluid motion. Her M9 came up, sight picture perfect, despite her shaking hands, despite the blood loss, despite the pain. She fired twice. Both rounds struck center mass. The insurgent crumpled. Nate spun around, eyes wide, staring at the dead fighter, then at Elena. She saw the questions forming on his face, the recognition that something didn't add up about the logistics officer who shot like a competitive marksman under impossible conditions. But before either could speak, the world tilted sideways. Elena's strength finally gave out, blood loss pulling her down into darkness. The last thing she heard was Nate's voice calling her name, his hands pressing against her wounds, trying to keep her alive. Then nothing. Elena's world was pain and fragmented consciousness. She felt hands on her, firm and professional, moving with purpose. Pressure on her side where the shrapnel had torn through. A voice, male, calm but urgent, cutting through the fog. "Stay with me, Thorne. You don't get to check out now, not after that stunt." Nate, the SEAL medic. She tried to speak, but only a groan escaped her lips. Thready pulse, significant blood loss from the abdominal wound in the femoral artery, Nate muttered, more to himself than anyone else. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, packing her side wound with quick clot gauze. The hemostatic agent burned like fire, jolting Elena closer to consciousness. "Tourniquet probably saved your life, but we need to get you out of here now." Through slitted eyes, Elena saw him working. His uniform was soaked in blood, hers and that of the other casualties he'd been treating. But his hands were steady, his face a mask of professional concentration. She'd seen that look before, on the faces of special operations medics during her classified training. The look of someone who refused to let death win. "Warhammer, this is Kincaid. Nate spoke into his radio headset. I need urgent medevac for a priority alpha. Female, late 20s, penetrating wound to left femoral region with successful tourniquet placement. Penetrating shrapnel wound to left flank, possible internal bleeding. Also multiple orthopedic trauma to left lower extremity. She's critical but stable. The Apache helicopters continued their gun runs overhead, the thunderous roar of their chain guns providing cover as the quick reaction force Humvees screamed into the kill zone. Soldiers poured out, establishing a defensive perimeter, medics rushing to the wounded. A staff sergeant from the QRF approached Nate, taking in the carnage with the kind of face that had seen too much war. Jesus Christ, what happened here? Coordinated ambush, Nate replied, still working on Elena. IED followed by small arms fire from elevated positions. They knew our route, our timing. This was planned. Who organized the defense? Looks like you held them off pretty damn well considering. Nate's eyes flicked to Elena's unconscious form. She did. The logistics officer. She took command after the LT was killed. The staff sergeant's eyebrows shot up. A logistics officer? You're kidding. I don't kid about stuff like this. Nate finished securing Elena's bandages and looked up, meeting the other man's eyes. She repaired our comms under fire, called in the QRF, marked targets for the gun runs, and organized the defensive perimeter, all with a mangled leg and a shrapnel wound that should have put her in shock. He paused. Oh, and she saved my life with a double tap to an insurgent who had me dead to rights. Perfect center mass, both rounds, while she was bleeding out. The staff sergeant whistled low. Well, I'll be damned. The distinctive whump, whump of a Black Hawk medevac helicopter grew louder as it approached. Nate waved it in, and within seconds the bird was on the ground, rotors kicking up a maelstrom of dust and debris. Let's move, Nate shouted, helping lift Elena's stretcher. He ran alongside as they loaded her into the helicopter, climbing in without hesitation. I'm riding with her. The crew chief started to protest, but something in Nate's expression killed the objection before it formed. The Black Hawk lifted off, banking hard as it climbed away from the kill zone. Inside the helicopter, Nate continued his work, starting an IV line and checking Elena's vitals. Her blood pressure was dangerously low. He hung a bag of O-negative blood and opened it wide. Come on, Thorne, he muttered. Don't you dare die on me. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. Did we? Yeah, we made it. Everyone you're responsible for is going to make it. He checked her pupil response with a penlight. But you need to stay awake. Talk to me. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? A ghost of a smile crossed her pale lips. Army basic. Nate's tone was gentle but firm. Bullshit. I've been doing this for 8 years. I've worked with Rangers, Delta, Green Berets. That shot you made, that was operator-level precision. Double tap center mass under stress while bleeding out. That's not basic training, Thorne. Elena's eyes drifted closed again. Hey, stay with me. Nate tapped her cheek lightly. Come on, Staff Sergeant. You didn't survive an ambush just to quit now. Her eyes opened again, and for just a moment, Nate saw something there. A flash of the person beneath the uniform. The warrior hiding behind the logistics officer designation. Then it was gone, replaced by confusion and pain. Tired, she whispered. I know, but you need to stay awake. Tell me something, anything. Where are you from? San Antonio. Her voice was barely audible over the helicopter's roar. Parents, both Army, wanted to make them proud. You did, Thorne. You absolutely did. The flight medic leaned over, checking the IV flow. 5 minutes to Bagram. Nate nodded, his hand instinctively going to Elena's wrist, checking her pulse. Still weak, but steady. She was a fighter, that much was clear. But the questions nagged at him. Her movements during the firefight, the way she'd taken command, the perfect execution of that shot. None of it matched her service record. He'd seen her personnel file when they'd loaded into the convoy that morning. Standard precaution, knowing who was in your vehicle. Staff Sergeant Elena Thorne, 92 Alpha Automated Logistical Specialist, assigned to Forward Operating Base Chapman for Supply Chain Management. 3 years in service, 2 deployments, a handful of commendations for logistical efficiency. Nothing about combat training. Nothing about tactical operations. Yet she'd moved through that firefight like she'd been born for it. The emergency room at Bagram Airfield was controlled chaos. Elena was rushed into surgery immediately, the trauma team working to repair the damage to her femoral artery and remove the shrapnel from her abdominal cavity. Nate waited outside, still covered in her blood, refusing to leave until he knew she'd made it through. Hours passed. Other wounded from the convoy arrived, and Nate helped where he could, his medical training overriding his exhaustion. He set fractures, sutured lacerations, held the hands of scared 19-year-olds who just experienced their first real combat. Finally, a surgeon emerged from the OR, pulling down his mask. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of too many long nights and too many young soldiers on his table. She's stable. The artery repair went well, and we got all the shrapnel. Her leg's going to need extensive orthopedic work. We've stabilized it for now, but she'll probably need more surgery stateside. The surgeon paused. She's lucky to be alive. Can I see her? The surgeon nodded. Recovery room, but she's still under anesthesia. Nate found Elena in a bed surrounded by monitors, her face pale against the white sheets. Her left leg was immobilized in an external fixator, metal rods and pins holding the shattered bone in alignment. Bandages wrapped her torso. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the warrior he'd seen in the firefight. He pulled up a chair and sat, suddenly exhausted. As he watched her breathe, watched the steady rhythm of her heart monitor, his mind churned through the inconsistencies. The way she'd applied that tourniquet with textbook precision. Most soldiers fumbled with him under stress, hands shaking, panic overriding training. She'd done it perfectly, one-handed, while bleeding out. The way she'd assessed the tactical situation and made command decisions instantly, no hesitation, no second guessing. The way she'd handled her sidearm, that draw, that sight picture, that follow-through. Who was Elena Thorne? Really? He dozed off in the chair, waking hours later to find her eyes open, watching him. Hey, he said softly. Welcome back. How long? Her voice was rough from the breathing tube. 18 hours since the ambush. You've been out of surgery for about 6. Elena tried to move, then grimaced as pain shot through her leg. The others? All stable. The 3 critical cases are going to make it. Nate leaned forward. Davis didn't survive the rollover. Elena's jaw tightened. She'd known, had seen his body, but hearing it confirmed brought fresh pain. What you did out there, the way you held that convoy together when everything went to hell, Nate said quietly, that was extraordinary. Just did what needed doing, she said, looking away. That's just it. Most people freeze. Most people panic. You moved like you'd done it 1,000 times before. He kept his voice casual, non-threatening. Where did you really learn that, Elena? Her jaw tightened. I told you, basic training. Right, and I'm just a simple medic who doesn't know the difference between basic combat skills and special operations level performance. Before Elena could respond, the curtain around her bed pulled back. A man in civilian clothes stood there. Nate stood slowly, his eyes meeting Elena's. He saw something there, a flash of resignation, maybe fear. I'll be right outside, he told her. As he stepped through the curtain, he heard the man speak, his voice low but carrying. "You broke protocol, Thorne." Nate should have kept walking, should have respected their privacy. Instead, he stood just outside the curtain, close enough to hear. "The engagement rules were clear," the man continued. "I saved American lives." Elena's voice was defiant, stronger than Nate expected from someone who'd just come out of surgery. "That was my protocol. Your protocol was to maintain your cover. Your protocol was to not draw attention." The man's voice hardened. "Your protocol was to protect a program that doesn't even officially exist." Nate's blood ran cold. "What was I supposed to do?" Elena's voice rose, angry now. "Let them die to protect a program that got canceled 3 years ago? A program that buried us all?" "Yes," the man said simply. "That was exactly what you were supposed to do. Project Valkyrie ended when Congress killed the funding. You were reassigned to logistics. You signed the NDA. You knew the consequences." Project Valkyrie, Nate's mind raced. A black program. Everything was starting to make terrible sense. "I'm not done here," Elena said. "Yes, you are. You're being transferred to Landstuhl in 48 hours. Germany, then stateside for continued rehabilitation. Your deployment is over, Staff Sergeant. I've been pushing supply requisitions and inventory spreadsheets for 3 years, while men with half my training get to do the job I was prepared for." "Lower your voice, Thorne." The man's tone turned dangerous. "There are people who would be very interested to know about your specialized skill set. People in Congress who killed the program in the first place. People who could make your life very difficult." A long silence followed. When Elena spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper, but Nate caught every word. "I saved lives yesterday. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counts for proving why women shouldn't be in combat roles." The contractor's words were brutal. "You took unnecessary risks. You exposed yourself. You made that SEAL medic curious. Now I have to do damage control." "Kincaid won't say anything." "Kincaid?" The man's voice took on a mocking edge. "You're on a first-name basis already. That's convenient. Or maybe it's a problem." "It's not like that. It better not be, because if any word of Project Valkyrie leaks, if anyone starts asking questions about where you really learned those skills, it won't just be your career that's over. There are national security implications you can't begin to imagine." Nate heard movement inside, the man preparing to leave. He quickly walked down the hallway, putting distance between himself and the recovery area, trying to look like he'd been gone for minutes rather than seconds. The contractor emerged, his face an unreadable mask. He walked past Nate without acknowledgement, but Nate felt the weight of his stare. A warning, clear as day. Then the man was gone, disappearing into the maze of hospital corridors. Nate waited a full minute before returning to Elena's bedside. She was staring at the ceiling, her jaw clenched, fighting back tears of frustration or pain. Maybe both. "You okay?" he asked softly. She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to compose herself. "Yeah, just post-surgery emotions. The drugs make you weepy." Nate pulled the chair closer and sat down. He should let it go, walk away, forget what he'd heard. But he'd never been good at letting things go, especially when they didn't make sense. "Elena, I'm not trying to put you in a difficult position," he began carefully. "But yesterday, what you did out there, it was extraordinary. And I've seen extraordinary. I've worked with the best operators in the world." He paused, choosing his words. "Whatever your story is, whatever you're not allowed to talk about, I respect that. I have clearances too. I know how secrets work." Elena turned her head to look at him, searching his face for something. Sincerity, maybe, or trustworthiness. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, because her expression softened slightly. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said quietly. "Whatever I was trained to do, whatever they promised me, it's over. I'm being shipped to Germany, then stateside. Medical discharge probably. Desk job if I'm lucky." She laughed bitterly. back to counting bullets instead of using them. You don't know that. Your leg. My leg is destroyed, Nate. I felt it shatter. I know what compound fractures mean. I know the recovery time, the rehabilitation requirements. Her voice cracked. I know my career is over before it ever really started. Nate wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong, but he'd seen the x-rays. The orthopedic surgeon had shown him professional courtesy between medical personnel. The femur was shattered in 3 places, the tibia fractured, ligament damaged throughout. It was a miracle she'd been able to move at all, let alone fight. For what it's worth, Nate said, you were better than most of the operators I've worked with. Whatever program trained you, they did it right. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thanks. That actually means a lot coming from you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The beeping of monitors and distant hospital sounds filled the space between them. Finally, Elena spoke again. Can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you still here? You're a SEAL. You have your own team, your own missions. Why are you sitting in a hospital room with a logistics officer you barely know? Nate considered the question. Why was he here? Professional courtesy? Medical responsibility? Or something else? That nagging curiosity about the woman who'd saved his life and didn't fit the mold she'd been placed in. Honestly, I'm not sure, he admitted. Maybe because I recognize something in you. That look in your eyes when you're fighting, when you're pushing through pain that would drop most people. I've seen it in the mirror. He smiled. It's the look of someone who has something to prove. And what do I have to prove? That's the question, isn't it? Nate stood. But I have a feeling you'll find a way to answer it. Before Elena could respond, a nurse entered, clipboard in hand. Staff Sergeant Thorne, I need to do a vitals check, and the doctor wants to discuss your transfer arrangements. I should go. Let you rest. Nate turned to leave. Nate? Elena called as he reached the curtain. He looked back. Thank you. For everything. He nodded and left, his mind still churning with questions. Over the next 2 days, Nate found himself drawn back to Elena's bedside during his off hours. He told himself it was professional, checking on a patient, making sure she was healing properly. But the truth was more complicated. They talked about small things at first. Favorite movies, worst MRE flavors, places they wanted to visit when they got home. Elena was funny, sharp-witted despite the pain medications. She told stories about logistical disasters in combat zones that had Nate laughing until his sides hurt. She never mentioned the ambush directly, never talked about her mysterious past. And Nate didn't push, but he noticed things. The way she assessed every person who entered her room. Threat analysis, automatic and unconscious. The way her eyes tracked exits and entrances. The way she positioned herself in the bed to maintain maximum visibility of the doorway, despite it causing her more pain. These weren't the habits of a supply sergeant. These were the habits of someone trained to operate in hostile territory. On her last day at Bagram, Nate brought her coffee. Real coffee, not the hospital swill, acquired through the mysterious channels that SEALs always seem to have access to. You're being nice to me, Elena said, accepting the cup gratefully. Why? Can't I just be a decent human being? SEALs aren't known for sentiment, Nate laughed. Fair point. He sobered. Look, I know you're headed to Germany, then stateside. I know your recovery is going to be long and hard, but I want you to know something. Elena waited, her dark eyes fixed on his face. Whatever happens, whatever they try to tell you about your limitations or your future, don't believe them. You're stronger than they know, tougher than they can measure. He pulled out a piece of paper with his email address written on it. And if you decide you want to fight your way back, really fight, I'll help however I can. No pressure. But if you need anything, advice, resources, just someone to vent to, reach out. Elena took the paper, holding it like it was something precious. Why are you doing this? Nate stood, shouldering his pack. His team was rotating out in 6 hours, heading back to their compound for the next operation. Because 6 months ago, I watched a friend get medically retired after an IED took his leg. The VA and the Army told him he was done. Washed up at 27. Know what he's doing now? What? Competing in triathlons, training other wounded warriors, living his best life out of pure spite. Nate grinned. Never underestimate the power of stubbornness and a good support system. A genuine smile crossed Elena's face, the first real one Nate had seen. Spite. I can work with that. Thought you might. The transport medic appeared in the doorway. Staff Sergeant Thorne, your flight to Landstuhl leaves in 30 minutes. We need to prep you for transport. Nate extended his hand. Elena shook it, her grip surprisingly strong. See you around, Petty Officer Kincaid. Count on it, Staff Sergeant Thorne. As Nate walked away, he glanced back once. Elena was tucking his email address into her pocket, that determined look back in her eyes. Whatever battles she faced ahead, he had a feeling she wouldn't be facing them quietly. In the corridor, he nearly collided with the DoD contractor from before. The man studied him with cold calculation. Petty Officer Kincaid, the man said, I trust your conversation with Staff Sergeant Thorne was appropriate? Nate met his stare without flinching. Just checking on a patient, sir. Professional courtesy. Of course. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. A word of advice. Some things are better left unexamined. Some questions are better left unasked. For everyone's benefit. I'm a medic, not an investigator, Nate replied evenly. I know my lane. The contractor nodded slowly. See that you stay in it. He walked away, leaving Nate standing alone in the hallway. But as Nate headed back to his team's area, he pulled out his phone and opened a secure message to an old friend. A buddy from BUD/S training who now worked in Naval Special Warfare Development Group. Hey, need a favor. Ever hear of something called Project Valkyrie? Trying to understand something I witnessed. Curiosity only. The response came back minutes later. Never heard of it, but if it's black enough that I haven't heard of it, you probably shouldn't be asking. Why? Nate stared at his phone for a long moment before typing. Met someone interesting. Skill set doesn't match their resume. Leave it alone, brother. Those programs have teeth. Nate deleted the message thread and pocketed his phone. Good advice. He probably wouldn't take it. 3 months later, everything would change. 3 months later, Naval Medical Center San Diego glowed under the California sun, its white walls a stark contrast to the dusty compounds of Afghanistan. Nate walked through the physical therapy wing, his duty bag slung over one shoulder, heading toward an appointment with a sports medicine specialist. His shoulder had been bothering him since a training accident 2 weeks prior. Nothing serious, but enough to warrant a professional opinion. He stopped dead in the corridor, his bag slipping from his grip. Elena Thorne was there. She stood at a weight rack, her back to him, wearing black compression shorts and a gray Army PT shirt soaked through with sweat. Her left leg, the one that had been shattered, was supporting her full body weight as she executed a perfect pistol squat. The movement was slow, controlled, the kind of exercise that required immense strength and balance even for healthy athletes. Nate watched in stunned silence as she completed the rep, then another. Her face contorted with concentration and pain. Her leg trembled violently on the third rep, and for a moment he thought she'd collapse. But she gritted her teeth and pushed through, rising to full standing. Only then did she see him. Her eyes widened in surprise. Nate. Elena. He walked closer, his trained eye automatically assessing her. She'd lost weight, too much weight. Dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and relentless pain. But there was also something else, a fierce determination burning in her gaze that hadn't been there before. What the hell are you doing? Physical therapy. She grabbed a towel, wiping sweat from her face. What does it look like? It looks like you're trying to destroy that leg. Nate gestured at her left side. You should be using a cane still. The orthopedic timeline for compound femoral fractures is 12 to 16 weeks for weight-bearing activities. 18 to 24 weeks for return to normal function, 6 to 12 months for full recovery. Elena cut him off, her voice sharp. I know the timeline, Nate. I also know I don't have 6 months. Nate set down his bag, studying her more carefully. The external fixator was gone, replaced by what looked like a custom brace. But even through the compression fabric, he could see the angry red scars running up her thigh and side. Surgical incisions poorly healed, suggesting she'd rushed through recovery. Come on, he said. Coffee, now. I have another hour of training scheduled. Not a request, Staff Sergeant. Something in his tone, the command voice he used with junior operators who were about to do something stupid, made Elena pause. She nodded slowly. Fine, but I'm buying. I owe you about a dozen coffees anyway. The hospital cafeteria was quiet, the afternoon lull between lunch and dinner. They sat in a corner booth, 2 styrofoam cups of mediocre coffee between them. Elena wrapped her hands around her cup like it was a lifeline, avoiding Nate's eyes. So, Nate said finally, you going to tell me what's really going on? Elena was silent for a long moment, staring into the dark liquid. When she spoke, her voice was tired. They want to medical board me out, permanent desk assignment or medical retirement. My choice. Your leg is healing ahead of schedule, according to my doctors, but not fast enough, not strong enough. She finally looked up at him. There's a fitness evaluation in 6 weeks. Pass it and I stay on active duty with a chance at reassignment. Fail it and I'm done. What kind of evaluation? Elena laughed bitterly. The kind designed to be impossible for someone with my injury history. Full Army combat fitness test standards, plus an additional tactical assessment. They want to see me deadlift 225 pounds, complete a 3-mile run in under 24 minutes, execute close-quarters combat drills, and demonstrate tactical mobility under simulated combat conditions. Nate let out a low whistle. That's aggressive. Most soldiers couldn't pass that even without injuries. That's the point. Elena's hands tightened around her cup. They don't want me to pass. They want me to fail, to prove that I should never have been in that convoy, should never have been in Afghanistan, should never have been anything more than a desk jockey pushing paperwork. Who's they? The same people who killed Project Valkyrie, the same people who have been trying to bury what we were trained to do. She met his eyes, and Nate saw raw desperation there. I can't go back, Nate. I can't spend the rest of my career in some basement office counting inventory and filing reports. I'll lose my mind. Nate understood that feeling, the need to be in the fight, to use the skills you'd bled for. He'd seen what happened to operators who got sidelined. Depression, substance abuse, a slow withering of the spirit that was worse than any physical injury. Show me, he said. What? Show me what you can do right now. I want to see where you're really at. Elena hesitated, then nodded. They went back to the PT wing, which was now mostly empty. She walked him through her current capabilities, the pistol squats, weighted lunges, box jumps that made Nate wince with every landing. Her form was good, her determination absolute, but he could see the pain, see the way her leg wanted to buckle, see the tremors that ran through her muscles. After 20 minutes, she was drenched in sweat and breathing hard. She collapsed onto a bench, her leg cramping visibly. So, she asked between gasps, what's the verdict? Nate sat beside her, considering his words carefully. You're strong, stronger than you should be given your timeline, but you're not ready for what they're asking, not in 6 weeks. Elena's face fell. I know, but I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Nate pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. I have friends, good friends. Some of them work in adaptive training programs for wounded warriors. Others run private facilities that train operators, current and former. They owe me favors. Nate, I can't afford. You're not paying anything except sweat and determination. He stopped on a contact. Garrett Sullivan, former SEAL who lost his leg in Ramadi and now runs an elite training center in Coronado. Garrett trains guys like us, people who refuse to let injuries define them. He's gotten double amputees through SWAT qualifications, helped wounded vets become triathletes. If anyone can get you ready in 6 weeks, it's him. Elena stared at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Why would you do this for me? You barely know me. I know enough. Nate met her gaze steadily. I know you took command when everyone else froze. I know you're a fighter, and I know the system is trying to crush you for being better than they expected. He paused. Besides, I remember what you told me in Bagram. You wanted to make your parents proud. Are you going to let some bureaucrats take that away? A tear rolled down Elena's cheek, but she wiped it away angrily. No, hell no. Then let me help. Elena extended her hand. Okay, but I'm warning you. I'm a terrible student, stubborn, argumentative, and I don't know when to quit. Nate shook her hand, grinning. Perfect. Those are exactly the qualities we're looking for. Over the next week, Nate made the arrangements. Garrett agreed immediately when he heard the story, offering his facility for early morning sessions before Nate's regular duties. 2 other former SEALs signed on as assistant trainers. Declan Harris, a combat diving instructor with a reputation for brutal conditioning work, and Ainsley Carver, one of the few women to complete an experimental integration program before politics shut it down. The night before their first real training session, Elena texted Nate, "Are you sure about this? I don't want you risking your reputation for me." His response was immediate. My reputation can handle it. Can your pride handle admitting you need help? Her reply made him smile. My pride is the least damaged part of me right now. See you at 0500. Nate set his phone down, staring at the ceiling of his barracks room. He was taking a risk. Helping Elena could raise questions, draw attention to things that were meant to stay buried. The DoD contractor's warning echoed in his mind. Some things are better left unexamined. But Nate had never been good at following warnings when something felt right. And helping Elena fight her way back, that felt like the rightest thing he'd done in a long time. He just hoped they could pull it off before the system ground her into dust. The abandoned warehouse in Coronado smelled of rust, concrete dust, and years of disuse. Elena arrived at 0500 sharp, her leg already aching from the drive. Through the rusted metal door she could hear voices. Male, confident, the easy banter of warriors who'd seen combat and survived. She hesitated, hand on the door handle. This was real now. No more pushing through rehab alone in sterile hospital rooms. No more hiding behind the logistics officer facade. These were SEALs, men who would see through any pretense, who would know instantly if she was wasting their time. You saved lives, she reminded herself. You earned this. Elena pushed open the door. The warehouse interior had been converted into a makeshift training facility. Weight racks, pull-up bars, and tactical shooting lanes occupied one half. The other half was a kill house, a maze of plywood walls configured to simulate urban combat scenarios. 3 people stood near a coffee station, turning as she entered. Nate stepped forward, still in his Navy PT gear. Elena, meet the team. He gestured to a muscular man in his late 30s, wearing a prosthetic leg below his left knee. Garrett Sullivan, lost it in Ramadi, 2006. Now he's faster than he was before. Garrett extended his hand, his grip firm. Nate tells me you're tough. We'll see. Declan Harris. Nate indicated a stocky man with a shaved head and kind eyes. Best combat swimmer I ever worked with. He'll handle your conditioning. Ma'am, Declan nodded respectfully. And Ainsley Carver. She went through an experimental integration program, made it further than 90% of the male candidates before politics shut it down. Ainsley was tall, lean, with the coiled strength of a predator. Her handshake was crushing. Heard you dropped an insurgent while bleeding out. Impressive. 1 shot, 1 kill, Elena said quietly. But it was desperation, not skill. Ainsley's smile was knowing. Skill under pressure is the only kind that matters. Garrett clapped his hands together. All right, enough socializing. Thorne, you said your eval is in 6 weeks. That gives us 42 days to make you into something resembling combat ready. We're going to start with a baseline assessment. I need to see what we're working with. What do you want me to do? Elena asked. Everything. Garrett gestured to the weight area. Deadlift, squat, pull-ups. Then we'll move to the kill house. I want to see how you move under pressure. The next hour was brutal. Elena pushed through deadlifts, 135 pounds, then 155. Her legs screaming with each rep. Pull-ups were agony, her reconstructed core muscles burning. Box jumps made her vision blur with pain. But she didn't stop, didn't complain. Finally, Garrett called a halt. Okay, now the interesting part. Declan set up the kill house scenario. Live sim rounds. Elena's heart rate spiked. She hadn't touched a weapon since Afghanistan. Hadn't run drills since before her injury. The muscle memory was there, buried under months of hospital beds and physical therapy. But could she access it? Declan handed her a Glock 19 loaded with simunition rounds. Painful but non-lethal marking cartridges. Standard building clearance, unknown number of hostiles. Rules of engagement are simple. Don't die, don't shoot civilians. Nate watched from the observation platform as Elena checked the weapon. Her movements automatic and professional. Magazine out, chamber check, press check, reload. Her hands moved with the kind of fluid confidence that took thousands of repetitions to develop. Where did she really learn that? Ainsley murmured beside him. That's the question, isn't it? Nate replied. Garrett started the scenario. Begin. Elena moved. Nate had seen thousands of operators run kill houses. He'd run them himself countless times. But watching Elena was different. Despite the obvious pain, despite the leg that wanted to buckle, she flowed through the structure like water. Smooth, efficient, deadly. She sliced the pie on corners with textbook precision. Her muzzle discipline was perfect. When the first pop-up target appeared, hostile with a weapon, her double tap was so fast it sounded like one shot. She cleared 3 rooms in 90 seconds, neutralizing 4 hostile targets while avoiding 2 civilian pop-ups. Her movement wasn't just competent, it was exceptional. When she emerged from the kill house, breathing hard but eyes sharp, the warehouse was silent. Garrett broke it first. What the hell was your MOS again? 92 Alpha. Logistics. Bullshit. Declan's voice wasn't angry, just matter of fact. I've trained logistics officers. They don't move like that. They don't shoot like that. Elena's jaw tightened. That's my MOS. Nate stepped down from the observation platform, his eyes locked on Elena's face. No more games, Elena. These people are putting their time, their resources, their reputations on the line to help you. They deserve the truth. For a long moment, Elena stood frozen, her hands clenched at her sides. The weight of the secret she'd carried for 3 years pressed down on her. The NDAs she'd signed. The threats. The warnings that speaking about Project Valkyrie would end her career, impossibly land her in prison. But she was tired. So tired of hiding, of pretending to be less than she was. Can I trust you? She asked quietly. All of you? Ainsley stepped forward. We've all got security clearances. We've all kept secrets that matter. Whatever you say stays in this room. Elena took a deep breath. 5 years ago, I was recruited for a program. They called it Project Valkyrie. It was a pilot initiative to train female soldiers for direct combat roles. Not support, not auxiliary, real combat integration. The kind that officially doesn't exist, Garrett said slowly. Exactly. Elena walked to a bench and sat, her leg finally giving out. They selected 30 of us from across the Army. Women with top fitness scores, high GT scores, psychological profiles that matched special operations candidates. We spent 18 months at a classified facility in North Carolina. What kind of training? Nate asked, though he was already starting to understand. Elena's voice was distant, remembering. We started with Ranger School fundamentals, land navigation, small unit tactics, airborne operations. Then we moved into advanced marksmanship, close quarters combat, explosive breaching, SEER training. They brought in instructors from Delta, from the 75th Ranger Regiment, even some agency contractors. Declan whistled low. That's essentially special operations qualification. That was the idea, Elena continued. The program was supposed to prove that women could meet the same standards as men, perform the same missions. We were going to be integrated into combat units, prove that gender didn't matter, only capability. What happened? Ainsley asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. Politics. The word came out bitter. Made to sign NDAs that threaten court-martial and federal prosecution if we ever disclosed our training. Elena laughed bitterly. They gave me two choices: become a logistics officer or get discharged with a general under honorable conditions. Basically a black mark that would follow me forever. So I chose logistics. Spent 3 years managing supply chains and counting ammunition while watching men with half my skills deploy on missions I was trained to execute. The warehouse was silent except for the distant sound of traffic outside. That's why you fought so hard during the ambush, Nate said. You weren't just surviving, you were finally getting to use your training. For about 5 minutes, then I got shot. Elena's hands trembled slightly. The DoD contractor who showed up at Bagram, he was there to remind me that my skills are still classified, that I'm still bound by that NDA, that if I ever tell anyone about Valkyrie, they'll destroy me. Garrett crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. But you just told us. Yeah, I did, Elena met his eyes, because I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending to be something I'm not. In 6 weeks, I either pass that evaluation and get a chance at a real assignment, or I get medical boarded into oblivion. Either way, my career as a logistics officer is over. I might as well go down swinging. Ainsley crouched in front of Elena, her expression intense. What kind of assignment are you hoping for? There's a new joint task force forming under JSOC. They're finally opening certain roles to qualified women. Not full SEAL positions, but support roles that work directly with Tier 1 units. Intelligence, tactical analysis, some direct action in specific scenarios. Elena's voice hardened with determination. I applied. They're considering me, but only if I can prove my injuries haven't made me a liability. That's what the evaluation is really about. 6 weeks. Declan ran a hand over his shaved head. It's not much time. It's what we have, Garrett said, and if Project Valkyrie trained her like she says, then the foundation is there. We're not building from scratch. We're reactivating muscle memory and building around her injury. Nate felt a surge of respect for his friends. They could have walked away, could have decided this was too risky, too complicated. Instead, they were already strategizing. All right, Thorne. Garrett's voice took on a commanding edge. Here's how this works. We train 6 days a week, 0500 to 0800. You don't miss sessions. You don't half-ass anything. You push through pain, but you tell us immediately if something feels wrong. We're building you up, not destroying you. Understood? Understood. We're going to focus on 3 areas: raw strength and conditioning, tactical movement with your injury, and psychological resilience. He ticked them off on his fingers. Declan handles conditioning. Ainsley works on tactical movement. I supervise strength training. And Nate, he glanced at his friend, you're her mental fitness coach. You keep her head in the game when the pain gets bad. Nate nodded. I can do that. Ainsley stood, offering Elena her hand and pulling her up. One more thing. When you're in this warehouse, you're not a logistics officer. You're an operator. You don't apologize for your skills. You don't downplay your abilities. And you sure as hell don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you that you don't belong. Elena felt something break open inside her chest. A pressure she'd been carrying for 3 years finally releasing. For the first time since Project Valkyrie ended, she was standing in a room full of people who saw her for what she really was. Not a desk jockey, not a mistake, not a political inconvenience. A warrior. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. All of you. Garrett grinned. Thank us after you pass that evaluation. Now let's get back to work. Those 6 weeks aren't going to train themselves. As Elena moved back toward the kill house, Nate caught her arm gently. Hey, you okay? She met his eyes, and for the first time in months, her smile was genuine. Yeah, for the first time in a long time, I actually am. Week 1 was hell. Elena's body rebelled against every movement. The injury sites, her leg, her side, screamed with each exercise. Declan pushed her through swimming drills in the frigid Pacific, the cold water both numbing and excruciating. Ainsley ran her through tactical scenarios until Elena's legs gave out completely, forcing Nate to carry her to his truck. I can't do this, Elena gasped on day 5, collapsed on the warehouse floor after a particularly brutal circuit. It's too much, too fast. Nate knelt beside her, his voice firm but not unkind. Yes, you can. You're just scared of how much it's going to cost. I'm not scared. Bullshit. He helped her sit up. You're terrified that you'll give everything you have and still fail. That's why you're looking for an exit now, before it matters. Elena glared at him, anger flashing in her eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Nate met her glare steadily. I watched half my BUD/S class quit during Hell Week. You know what they all had in common? They started questioning whether they could do it. The moment you ask that question, you've already lost. So what? I just ignore the pain? Pretend my leg isn't held together with pins and prayer? No. You acknowledge the pain, respect it, and push through it anyway. But it was in the kill house where she truly shined. Ainsley set up increasingly complex scenarios, multiple floors, civilian hostages, time pressures. Elena adapted to each one with frightening efficiency. Her tactical decision-making was exceptional, her threat assessment instant and accurate. Watch this, Ainsley told Nate one morning, pulling him to the observation window. I'm running her through a scenario we use for SEAL team qualification. The setup was brutal. A 3-story structure, 6 hostile targets, 3 civilian targets, and a ticking clock. 30 seconds to clear the building or lose the hostage. Garrett started the timer. Execute. Elena exploded through the door, her injured leg barely slowing her. She cleared the first floor in 8 seconds. 2 hostiles neutralized with precise double taps. 1 civilian identified and passed. Second floor, hostile behind a desk, another emerging from a doorway. She engaged both while moving, never breaking stride. Third floor. The remaining 2 hostiles were in a room with the hostage. A tactical nightmare. Nate watched as Elena used a flashbang simulator, entered during the distraction, and neutralized both targets without hitting the civilian. Total time, 26 seconds. Jesus, Garrett breathed. That's faster than my time. Ainsley was grinning. Told you, she's not just good, She's exceptional. Nate felt a complex mix of pride and concern. Elena was proving she belonged, but she was also drawing attention, the kind of attention that could raise questions about where she'd learned these skills. Week 3 was when things changed between them. They were working late. Everyone else had gone home. Nate was spotting Elena through a strength session when her legs suddenly buckled during a weighted lunge. She went down hard, crying out in pain. Elena? Nate dropped beside her, his hands immediately checking for new injury. Where? What happened? Cramp, she gasped, her face white. Just a cramp, old injury site. But Nate saw the tears streaming down her face. Not from the cramp, but from something deeper. 3 weeks of relentless pushing, of fighting through pain, of refusing to show weakness, had finally caught up with her. Hey, he said softly, it's okay, you're allowed to break sometimes. No, I'm not. Her voice was fierce through the tears. I don't have that luxury. If I break, if I show weakness… Elena, Nate's hands cupped her face, forcing her to look at him. You're one of the strongest people I've ever met. Crying doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. Something shifted in that moment. The professional distance they'd maintained crumbled. Elena's hands covered his, and they stayed like that, frozen in the intimacy of shared vulnerability. I'm scared, she whispered. What if I'm not enough? You are. I've seen you. You're more than enough. Their faces were inches apart. Nate could feel her breath, see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. It would be so easy to close that distance, to cross the line they'd both been carefully avoiding. Elena leaned forward slightly. Nate did the same. Then his phone buzzed, a text from Garrett. How's she doing? Looked like she was pushing hard today. The spell broke. They pulled apart, both breathing hard. We should keep this professional, Nate said, though every instinct screamed otherwise. Elena nodded, wiping her eyes. Yeah, you're right. After the evaluation. After I know where I stand. After, Nate agreed. But as he helped her up, his hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. Week 4 brought a visitor. Nate arrived at the warehouse to find a black SUV parked outside. Government plates. His stomach sank. Through the window he saw Dr. Vincent Aldridge standing with Elena, his body language aggressive. Nate entered quietly, staying out of sight but close enough to hear. Making a spectacle of yourself, Aldridge was saying. Training with Navy SEALs. Do you understand how many eyes that puts on you? I'm training for my evaluation, Elena replied, her voice steady. That's all. That's all? The man's laugh was harsh. You're demonstrating capabilities that your official record says you shouldn't have. You're creating a paper trail that leads directly back to Valkyrie. Then maybe Valkyrie shouldn't have been buried in the first place. Aldridge stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Listen carefully, Thorne. There are people in Washington who would love to use you as evidence that the program was a mistake. Look, they'd say, we trained these women to be killers, and now they can't be controlled. Is that what you want to be? The poster child for why women shouldn't be in combat? Elena's hands clenched into fists. I'm not a mistake, and I won't apologize for being good at what I do. Your pride is going to destroy you. Better that than dying slowly behind a desk. Aldridge studied her for a long moment, then sighed. The JSOC task force, you really think they'll take you? If I pass the evaluation, yes. And if you pass, if you get assigned to that unit, you'll be under a microscope. Every mission, every decision, every mistake will be magnified because you're one of the first. Can you handle that pressure? I was trained to handle it. A ghost of a smile crossed Aldridge's face. Yes, you were. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Thorne, I hope you make it. Not everyone from Valkyrie gave up. Most took their discharge and walked away. But you're still fighting. That counts for something. After he left, Nate emerged from the shadows. Elena was standing rigid, staring at nothing. How much did you hear? She asked without turning. Enough, Nate walked to her side. He's wrong, you know. You're not going to be a poster child for failure. You're going to be proof that the program should have continued. Elena finally looked at him. You really believe that? I know that. Nate's voice was firm. In 2 weeks, you're going to walk into that evaluation and show them exactly what Project Valkyrie created. Not a mistake, a warrior. Week 5 was the final push. The team increased intensity, running Elena through scenarios that would break most operators. 20-hour training days, multiple kill house runs under fatigue, psychological stress tests designed to break concentration. Elena never quit. But on Wednesday, 3 weeks before her evaluation, disaster struck. Elena spiked a fever during morning training, 103 degrees. Her surgical site was hot, red, swollen. Infection. The emergency room doctor was blunt. Cellulitis spreading from the surgical site. If this reaches the bone, you're done. Minimum 2 weeks of IV antibiotics and complete rest. I don't have 2 weeks, Elena said, her voice panicked. My evaluation is in 3 weeks. Then you'll fail it. The doctor's tone was matter-of-fact. Because if you keep training on this leg, you'll lose it. Elena looked at Nate, desperation in her eyes. Do something, please. Nate pulled the doctor aside, used every connection he had, called in favors, made promises, finally convinced the infectious disease specialist to compromise. 4 days of IV antibiotics in the hospital, then oral antibiotics with close monitoring. He stayed with Elena every moment, changing her bandages, managing her medications, holding her hand through feverish nightmares where she failed the evaluation again and again. What if I'm not strong enough? She whispered one night, her fever-bright eyes searching his face. You're the strongest person I know, Nate replied, meaning every word. 4 days, then we get back to work. On day 4, Elena's fever broke. The infection retreated. She returned to training with a vengeance. Her numbers climbed. Deadlift, 215 pounds. Run time, 23 minutes. Kill house scores in the top operator percentile. But her leg remained unstable, cramping under sustained load, tremors under high stress. It was a wild card none of them could control. On the final Friday before her evaluation, Garrett called everyone together. Thorne, you've done something I didn't think was possible, he said. You've not only recovered from career-ending injuries, you've exceeded your pre-injury capabilities. Your deadlift is at 215. Your run time is 23 minutes. Your tactical scores are in the top percentile of every operator I've trained. Declan stepped forward, handing her a challenge coin, the mark of a warrior. You've earned this. Ainsley hugged her fiercely. Go show those bastards what Project Valkyrie really was. Nate waited until the others had left before approaching. Ready for Monday? Elena's smile was confident, genuine. Yeah, I am. Elena, I need to say something. Nate took a breath. These past 5 weeks, working with you, it's been the most meaningful thing I've done in a long time. You're incredible, not just as an operator, but as a person. Nate, let me finish. His eyes held hers. After the evaluation, after you get that assignment, and you will, I want to take you to dinner. A real dinner, not as your trainer or your friend, as someone who wants to know everything about you. Elena's breath caught. That sounds like a date. It is a date. She stepped closer, her hand finding his. Then yes, after the evaluation, after I prove them all wrong, it's a date. They stood like that, hands clasped, the promise of something more hanging between them like electricity. Then Elena pulled him close and kissed him. Deep, passionate, everything they'd been holding back for weeks pouring into that moment. When they broke apart, both were breathless. Just imagine what the second one will be like, Nate said. Elena laughed, her forehead against his. You're making it very hard to be patient. Good, then you'll come back. We'll both come back. Elena Thorne was ready. Monday morning arrived cold and gray, fog rolling in from the Pacific. Elena stood outside the Naval Special Warfare Command fitness facility, staring at the building that would determine her future. The fog wrapped around it like a shroud, muffling sounds, making the world feel smaller, more intimate, just her and the challenge waiting inside. Nate appeared beside her, 2 coffee cups in hand. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, offering her one. "Slept like a baby," she lied, accepting the cup. "A baby who woke up every hour in a cold sweat, having nightmares about failing." Nate smiled, but his eyes were serious. "You're not going to fail." "You don't know that." "I do." He touched her arm gently. "I've seen what you can do. They're about to see it too." Elena took a sip of coffee, letting the heat ground her. 6 weeks of brutal training had brought her to this moment. All the pain, all the doubt, all the late nights when her legs screamed and her body begged her to quit. It all came down to the next 3 hours. "Time to go in," Nate said. Elena nodded. They walked toward the entrance together, their footsteps echoing on the concrete. Inside, the evaluation course was set up like a gauntlet designed by someone who wanted her to fail. Elena recognized the hand of bureaucracy in every obstacle, each one calculated to exploit her weaknesses. The panel of observers sat in an elevated viewing area, 5 people who would decide her fate. Colonel Thurston Blackwell sat in the center chair. 58 years old, ramrod straight posture, steel gray hair cut to regulation length. His face was carved from granite, expression neutral, but eyes sharp as razors. To his right sat a man in a dark suit, civilian but with military bearing, the JSOC representative. To Blackwell's left, 2 physical therapists and a sports medicine specialist completed the panel. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," Blackwell called out, his voice echoing through the facility like judgment itself. "You understand the parameters of today's evaluation?" "Yes, sir." Elena's voice was steady, no tremor, no hesitation. "You'll complete a modified Army combat fitness test, followed by tactical mobility scenarios, and ending with a combat simulation under live-fire conditions." Blackwell consulted his clipboard. "Your injured leg has been documented. No allowances will be made for your condition. You either meet the standard or you don't. Clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." "Then let's begin." The first test was deadlifts. Target, 225 pounds for 3 repetitions. The bar waited on the platform like a challenge, like a dare. Elena approached it, feeling every eye on her. Garrett's voice echoed in her mind. "You've done 215. 10 more pounds is nothing but fear." She gripped the bar, planted her feet, feeling the weight settle into her hands. Her left leg trembled, the old injury site sending warning signals up her spine. She ignored them, took a breath, lifted. The weight came up smooth, her form perfect despite the protest from her leg. 1. She lowered it with control, resetting her grip. Lifted again. The bar felt heavier this time, or maybe that was just her leg screaming. 2. One more, just one more. She gripped the bar, felt the rough knurling bite into her palms, thought of her parents, thought of the convoy in Afghanistan, thought of the 30 women from Project Valkyrie who'd been buried by politics. Lifted. Her leg buckled slightly. She caught it, locked it, held the weight at full extension, then dropped it with a controlled bang. "Time, 23 seconds, an evaluator called out. "Pass." Blackwell's face remained neutral, but Elena saw something flicker in his eyes. Disappointment, maybe, or surprise. Next came pull-ups. Target, 10. Her shoulders burned by rep 7. Rep 8 made her vision blur. Rep 9, she had to kip slightly to get her chin over the bar. Rep 10, she thought she might fall, but she didn't. Pass. Sit-ups. Sprint, drag, carry. Each event pushed her body to its limits. Her legs screamed. The old injury sites burned with each movement. But 5 weeks of brutal training had rebuilt her. Not just physically, but mentally. She'd learned to embrace the pain, to use it as fuel. Blackwell provided running commentary throughout. Form degradation on rep 7. That carry technique wouldn't pass in my unit. Compensating heavily with upper body, but Elena passed each event. Barely, but passing was passing. After 90 minutes, one of the physical therapists leaned to his colleague. Given her injury timeline, this is medically remarkable. The JSOC representative said nothing, just took notes with intense focus. Blackwell didn't look impressed. He looked suspicious. The tactical mobility test came next, an obstacle course designed to simulate combat movement. Walls to scale, trenches to cross, a tire run, rope climbs, all while carrying 50 pounds of gear and a rifle. Begin, Blackwell said. Elena attacked the course with controlled aggression. Wall climb, she used her good leg for the initial push, hauled herself over. Trench crossing, a leap that made her heart stop, but she landed solid. The tire run was agony, each impact jarring her reconstructed femur, sending shockwaves of pain up her spine. Then came the rope climb, 15 feet of thick naval rope. Arms only, no leg assistance allowed. Elena jumped, gripped, and began to climb. Her arms burned. 10 feet, 12 feet. Her left leg started cramping, the muscle seizing without warning. She felt it lock up, useless weight dragging at her. Don't look down. Don't think about falling. Climb. She reached the top, slapped the buzzer, and descended. When her feet hit the ground, her left leg buckled momentarily. She caught herself, forced it to lock, and continued running toward the finish line. Time, 4 minutes, 32 seconds, the evaluator called. Pass. 2 down, 1 to go. The final phase was the combat simulation, a live-fire exercise in a shoot house. The scenario was classified until she entered, designed to test decision-making under pressure. Through the observation window, Nate watched the panel's faces. Most were impressed. Blackwell remained stone-faced. The JSOC rep was leaning forward, intensely focused. Final scenario, Blackwell announced. Simulated casualty evacuation under fire. You'll enter a hostile structure, locate and extract a wounded friendly, and reach the extraction point. Live rounds will be fired overhead. Time limit, 8 minutes. Elena entered the structure, and the simulation began. The wounded soldier was a 180-pound dummy positioned on the second floor. Elena cleared the first floor, moving with the tactical precision Ainsley had drilled into her. Checking corners, slicing the pie, every movement textbook perfect. Stairs, always the most dangerous part. She ascended carefully, weapon up, eyes scanning, found the casualty in a defensive position, simulated blood pooled around it. She hoisted the dummy into a fireman's carry, feeling the weight settle onto her shoulders, pressing down on her injured leg. Started back down. That's when her leg betrayed her. The cramping that had started during the rope climb returned with a vengeance. The muscle seizing completely, locking up like someone had driven a spike through her thigh. Elena stumbled on the stairs, the dummy's weight shifting dangerously. Pain exploded through her leg, white hot and blinding. In the observation room, Nate shot to his feet. "Come on, Elena, you've got this." She caught herself on the railing, gasping. The dummy's weight pressed down on her injured leg, right on the surgical site. Every instinct screamed to put it down, to give her leg a moment to recover. But 8 minutes meant 8 minutes. Elena gritted her teeth, adjusted the weight, and continued. Her face contorted in agony with each step. Her leg dragged, barely supporting her weight. But she moved. One step, another, another. Live rounds cracked overhead, the added stress of simulated enemy fire. Smoke filled the corridor. Elena's vision blurred from pain and sweat, but she kept moving. The extraction point was 50 feet away. 40, 30. Her leg gave out completely. Elena went down on one knee, the dummy sliding from her shoulders. For a moment she stayed there, breathing hard, the pain overwhelming. Through the smoke, she could see the extraction point, so close. In the observation room, Colonel Blackwell leaned back in his chair, a satisfied expression on his face. There it is. Physical failure under stress. Exactly what I predicted. She's moving, the JSOC rep interrupted. Elena was crawling, one hand gripping the dummy's harness, dragging it behind her. She crawled toward the extraction point, her left leg useless, dragging behind her. But she used her arms, her good leg, pure determination. 10 feet, 5. She crossed the line with 14 seconds to spare, collapsing beside the dummy. Time, 7 minutes 46 seconds, the evaluator called out. Pass. The observation room erupted in murmurs. The physical therapists were shaking their heads in disbelief. Even some of the officers looked impressed. But Colonel Blackwell stood abruptly. Objection. The room fell silent. That was not a completion, Blackwell declared. She crawled the final distance. That's a tactical failure. In real combat, crawling while dragging a casualty would get both soldiers killed. She completed the objective within the time limit, the JSOC rep countered, his voice calm but firm. The spirit of the evaluation is combat readiness, not checking boxes. Blackwell turned to face the panel. Gentlemen, I think we need to address the elephant in the room. Staff Sergeant Thorne's performance today has been extraordinary. Too extraordinary. Elena was helped into the observation room, limping badly. She stood before the panel, exhausted, blood visible through her pants where the surgical incision had reopened. But she stood straight, head high. Blackwell continued. According to her service record, Thorne is a 92 Alpha, an automated logistical specialist. Yet today she demonstrated tactical proficiency that exceeds most infantry soldiers. Her weapons handling, her tactical movement, her performance in the kill house. These are not skills a logistics officer should possess. What are you implying, Colonel? The JSOC rep asked, his tone dangerous. I'm questioning the integrity of this evaluation. Either Staff Sergeant Thorne received undisclosed specialized training, which raises questions about what else she's hiding, or she's been training specifically for this evaluation, which suggests premeditation and possibly coaching. Nate couldn't stay silent any longer. Permission to speak, sir? Blackwell glared at him. You're out of order, petty officer. With respect, sir, you're out of line. Nate stepped forward, his voice controlled but passionate. I was in the convoy ambush in Afghanistan. I watched Staff Sergeant Thorne take command and hold that convoy together when everything went to hell. She repaired communications equipment under fire, organized a defensive perimeter, and neutralized an enemy combatant, all with injuries that should have put her in shock. That's irrelevant. It's completely relevant. Nate's voice rose. You want to know where she learned her skills? She learned them the same place every operator learns them, through blood, sweat, and refusing to quit when every instinct says to stop. I've worked with Tier 1 operators my entire career. Staff Sergeant Thorne has the heart of a warrior. Maybe that makes you uncomfortable, but it doesn't make her unqualified. Stand down, Petty Officer Kincaid, Blackwell snapped. No, sir. Not until you stop trying to disqualify someone for being better than you expected. The room was electric with tension. The JSOC rep stood, his expression unreadable. Colonel Blackwell, do you have evidence of impropriety? Blackwell's jaw worked. No, but I have concerns about someone who wasn't honest about their background. I was honest about everything I was allowed to be honest about, sir. Elena interrupted, her voice clear despite the pain. My service record is accurate. My training is classified. And yes, I prepared extensively for this evaluation because it meant everything to me. But I didn't cheat. I didn't take shortcuts. I earned every rep, every run, every single movement you saw today. Classified training. Blackwell pounced on the word. So you admit there's something in your background that doesn't appear in your record. The JSOC rep held up a hand. That's enough. Staff Sergeant Thorne, step outside. We need to deliberate. Elena limped toward the door, Nate moving to help her. As they exited, she whispered, "Did I just destroy my career by admitting that?" "If they reject you for telling the truth," Nate replied, "then they don't deserve you anyway." They sat in the hallway waiting. 15 minutes became 30. 30 became an hour. Elena's leg throbbed with each heartbeat, blood seeping through the bandage. But she didn't complain, didn't ask for pain medication. She just sat, hands clasped, waiting for judgment. Finally, the door opened. The JSOC rep emerged alone. Elena stood, her heart hammering against her ribs. Nate stood beside her, his hand finding hers briefly before letting go. A silent gesture of support. "Staff Sergeant Thorne," the man began, and Elena braced for rejection. "The panel has reached a decision." Here it comes, Elena thought. All that work, all that pain, for nothing. "Your performance today was exceptional by any standard," the JSOC rep continued. "However, Colonel Blackwell raised legitimate concerns about discrepancies between your official record and your demonstrated capabilities." He paused, and Elena felt her world tilting. "Which is why I made some calls during our deliberation." He pulled out his phone, turning it to show Elena a document. Her blood ran cold. It was a classified file. Project Valkyrie stamped across the top in red letters. "I have the appropriate clearances," the man continued, "and I've been briefed on the program. All 30 participants. What you accomplished. What you endured when it was canceled." His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You were supposed to be the future, Thorne. Instead, you got buried in bureaucracy." "Sir, I can explain." "No need. I understand why you couldn't disclose it." He pocketed his phone. "Colonel Blackwell doesn't have the clearance to know about Valkyrie, and he never will. As far as he's concerned, you're just an exceptionally motivated soldier who trained hard for this evaluation." The man glanced at Nate, then back to Elena. "The panel voted 4-1 in your favor. Colonel Blackwell was the dissenting vote." Elena's legs nearly gave out for an entirely different reason. "I passed?" "More than passed. You exceeded standards in every category except the final casualty extraction, where you met the minimum time requirement through unorthodox but effective means." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "The JSOC task force needs people who don't quit when conventional methods fail. People who find a way to complete the mission no matter what." "So I'm in?" Elena's voice cracked with emotion. "I'm actually in. You'll receive your official orders within 72 hours. Report to Fort Liberty in 3 weeks for task force orientation and team integration." He extended his hand. "Welcome to Joint Special Operations Command, Staff Sergeant Thorne." Elena shook his hand, unable to speak. Tears streamed down her face. 3 years of frustration and anger and hope pouring out all at once. The man nodded to Nate, then paused before walking away. "One more thing, Petty Officer. Colonel Blackwell will be removed from all future evaluation oversight. His conduct today demonstrated clear bias." He paused. "Personal tragedy doesn't excuse professional misconduct." Nate nodded. Justice. Quiet, but certain. The JSOC rep walked away, leaving them alone in the corridor. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Elena turned to Nate and collapsed into his arms, her body shaking with sobs. Relief, joy, exhaustion, everything hitting her at once. "You did it," Nate whispered into her hair. "I knew you would. I couldn't have done it without you," Elena managed between sobs. "Without all of you. You had it in you all along. We just reminded you." They stood like that, holding each other in the empty hallway, until Elena's tears subsided. When she pulled back, her face was blotchy and her eyes were red, but she was smiling. Genuinely, completely smiling. "I need to call Garrett, Ainsley, Declan." "They know," Nate said. "I texted them during the deliberation. They're waiting at the warehouse with celebratory beer and probably very bad pizza." Elena laughed, the sound pure and unreserved. Then what are we waiting for? The warehouse celebration was exactly what Elena needed. Garrett presented her with another challenge coin, this one from his old SEAL team. Declan insisted on arm wrestling. She beat him, her strength from training finally paying off in the most ridiculous way. Ainsley gave her a fierce hug and whispered, "Make them regret ever doubting us." But eventually the others left, citing early morning obligations and giving Elena and Nate increasingly obvious looks. Soon it was just the two of them, sitting on the warehouse floor with the last of the beer. "So," Nate said, "Fort Liberty in 3 weeks." "Yeah." Elena picked at the label on her bottle. "Where are you headed?" "That's the thing." Nate turned to face her. "My team got orders yesterday. We're rotating back to Afghanistan. Same operational theater where you'll be working." Elena's heart skipped. "You're serious?" "Dead serious. Different units, but we'll be in the same sandbox." He set down his beer, his expression intense. "Elena, these past 5 weeks working with you, they've been the best weeks I've had in a long time. You're incredible, not just as an operator, but as a person. You're fierce and stubborn, and you make me want to be better." "Nate, let me finish." He took her hand. "I know the timing is terrible. We're both deploying. Both have missions that matter. I'm not asking you to figure everything out right now, but I need you to know, when we're both back stateside, when the dust settles, I want to see where this goes. For real." Elena's throat tightened with emotion. "I want that too. More than you know." She paused. But we both have something to prove first," Elena said softly. "You need to lead your team. I need to prove I belong in that task force. That Project Valkyrie wasn't a waste." She squeezed his hand. "We've both spent our whole lives training for what comes next. I don't want to start something when we can't give it the attention it deserves." Nate nodded slowly. "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying when we're both back, when we've done what we need to do, let's have that date. A real one. Not in a warehouse or a hospital. Somewhere nice where we can be just Nate and Elena, not Petty Officer Kincaid and Staff Sergeant Thorne." "That sounds perfect." Nate leaned closer. "But that's months away. I get one thing now." "What's that?" Instead of answering, Nate cupped her face and kissed her. It was gentle, sweet, and charged with all the promise of what could be. Elena melted into it, her hands finding his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, speaking everything they couldn't yet say aloud. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Okay," Elena whispered. "That was worth waiting for. Just imagine what the second one will be like." Nate's smile was devastating. "You're making it very hard to be patient." "Good," he kissed her forehead. "Then you'll come back. We'll both come back." 2 weeks later, Elena stood at the airport in full uniform, her deployment bag at her feet. Nate was there, also in uniform, shipping out on a different flight. They'd said their goodbyes the night before. Dinner with the team, toasts to future victories, promises to stay safe. But now, in the harsh fluorescent lights of the terminal, reality was setting in. "You have everything?" Nate asked, though they both knew it was a delaying tactic. "Yeah, orders, medical records, 3 years of pent-up determination," Elena smiled. "The usual deployment kit." "Elena," Nate's voice was serious, "promise me something. Anything. Promise me you won't take unnecessary risks trying to prove yourself. You've already proven everything. Just do the mission, stay safe, and come home. I promise, if you promise the same thing." "Deal." He pulled her into a hug, holding her tight. Against her ear, he whispered, "I'm proud of you. Whatever happens over there, remember that someone back here believes in you completely." Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Same goes for you. Come back to me, Nate Kincaid. Wouldn't miss it for the world." They separated as Elena's flight was called. She shouldered her bag, gave him one last look, memorizing his face, his smile, the way he looked at her like she was capable of anything, and walked toward her gate. Halfway there, she turned back. Nate was still watching. She called out across the terminal. 8 months! 8 months, he called back. It's a date. Elena turned and walked through the gate, her head held high, her stride confident despite the slight limp that would probably never fully disappear. Behind her was 3 years of frustration, bureaucracy, and forced mediocrity. Ahead was the mission she'd trained for, the role she'd fought for, the chance to finally be who she was meant to be. She'd been wounded, shot, broken, buried under paperwork and NDAs, and people who couldn't see past her gender to her capabilities. But she wasn't broken, not even close. As the plane lifted off, Elena looked out the window at the California coastline disappearing below. Somewhere down there, Nate was boarding his own flight. Somewhere in North Carolina, a task force was waiting for her. Somewhere in Afghanistan, missions awaited that would test everything Project Valkyrie had taught her. She was ready. For the first time in 3 years, Elena Thorne wasn't pretending to be someone else. She wasn't hiding her skills or apologizing for her strength. She was exactly who she'd trained to be, a warrior heading into the fight she'd always been meant for. Wounded, yes. The scars would always be there, physical and emotional reminders of what it cost to fight for her place. But unbroken, absolutely unbroken. And when she came back, when both she and Nate came back from their deployments, they'd have that date. They'd have time to explore what this connection between them really meant. They'd have a future built on mutual respect, shared values, and the unshakable foundation of two people who understood what it meant to fight for what mattered. Elena smiled, closed her eyes, and let the drone of the engines carry her toward her new beginning. Her phone buzzed. Not a call, a text notification. She pulled it out, surprised to see a group thread she'd been added to, labeled simply Valkyrie 30. Messages scrolled up the screen from numbers she half recognized, women she'd trained with 5 years ago. Heard you made it through. Proud of you. KM. You did what the rest of us couldn't. Keep fighting. AR. She pocketed the phone. The weight felt different now. Not just her burden to carry, their collective future resting on her shoulders. No pressure. She smiled at the thought, then laughed quietly. After everything she'd been through, a little pressure was nothing. Fort Liberty appeared below as the plane descended 3 weeks later. The sprawling military installation stretched across the North Carolina landscape, home to some of the most elite units in the American military. Somewhere down there, her new life waited. The Joint Special Operations Command Facility sat in a restricted area of the base, anonymous buildings that held classified operations and the operators who executed them. Elena reported in full uniform, her orders crisp in her hand. The commander was a weathered colonel with the quiet intensity of someone who'd seen real combat. He reviewed her file, his eyes lingering on the medical reports, the commendations from Afghanistan, the evaluation scores from Coronado. You understand what we do here, Staff Sergeant Thorne? Yes, sir. Intelligence support for Tier 1 operations, tactical analysis, mission planning, and direct action support in specific scenarios. That's the official description. The colonel leaned back in his chair. Unofficially, you'll be working with SEAL teams, Delta operators, and Rangers on missions that don't officially exist. You'll see things that never happened, kill people who were never there, and go places that aren't on any map. He paused. Still interested? Yes, sir. Good. He handed her a mission folder. Your first deployment briefs tomorrow. Afghanistan, direct action support for a SEAL team operation. You'll be providing overwatch and intelligence coordination. Elena opened the folder. Classified photos, target packages, serious operations. The kind of work she'd been trained for. The kind of work that mattered. Any questions, Staff Sergeant? No, sir. Thank you, sir. As she left his office, Elena felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This was real. This was happening. After 3 years in the shadows, she was finally doing the job she'd been prepared for. Her phone buzzed. A text from Nate, sent hours earlier from somewhere in Afghanistan. Heard through the grapevine you got your orders. Proud of you. Stay safe out there. 8 months. Elena typed back. 7 months and 3 weeks now. It's a date. She pocketed her phone and walked toward the briefing room, ready for whatever came next. The SEAL medic and everyone else had been stunned by her secret training, but they hadn't seen anything yet. Somewhere in the Afghan mountains, months from now, their paths would cross again. A firefight going sideways, a SEAL team pinned down, and a voice over the radio, calm and professional. Viper 6, this is Overwatch. Target acquired. Grid November Tango 4721. How copy? And a familiar voice responding, surprise and relief mixing together. Good copy, Overwatch. That you up there, Thorn? Affirmative, Viper 6. Somebody's got to keep you SEALs out of trouble. A low chuckle. Good to have you watching our backs. Let's go to work. But that was months away. Right now, Elena Thorne had a briefing to attend, a mission to prepare for, and a future to build. One deployment at a time. One mission at a time. One day closer to that date with the man who'd helped her remember who she was. Wounded but unbroken, she walked into the briefing room and took her seat among the warriors. Finally home. Finally where she belonged. The story of Project Valkyrie wasn't over. It was just beginning.